because of my daughter. So yesterday was particularly bad. Right, okay, welcome everyone. Are we ready to go? Emma? Yeah, brilliant, thank you. Fantastic. Okay, welcome, good morning. And the first item is to receive any apologies for absence. And I think we've got apologies from Richard and Eric. Okay. Are you okay, John? Yeah. Minutes of the meeting held on the 3rd October. Were there any questions on the minutes, first of all? Okay, I'm happy to propose that they're accepted. Seconded by Lucian. We all in favour of that, presumably. Thank you. Public questions and statements. I don't believe there are any public questions. There are no items of urgent business. Are there any declarations of interest? No. Okay, brilliant. Member questions. Christopher, Nigel, John, I don't know if you want to ask anything at this stage. No. Recommendations from the Overview and Scrutiny Committee. Nigel, you're welcome to speak.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yes, I can tell you that there were no recommendations from the October meeting of Overview and Scrutiny. From the 28th of September meeting, there was one recommendation to Cabinet, and that was to give consideration or to recommend that consideration is given to the inclusion of limited contextual information to support performance data in the performance management framework. And this was subject to further discussion between yourself and Councillor Holliday. So that was the recommendation. What I'm not aware of is whether that discussion has taken place and whether there was anything that fed into the item that we'll be seeing at item 11.
No, there hasn't been any discussion, Nigel. I was, and the offer is open to all members of the committee of ONS, of course, that we're happy to sort of take any information on board about sort of things that the members would like to see. I don't think we've had that yet. I think Matt is going to ask for a meeting with Victoria to try and progress that. But obviously the offer is still open to any member of ONS if they want to come forward with some other level of detail that they would like to see in those reports. I don't think we're at all sort of in a position to say no to anything really. I think we're quite happy to have that discussion. So if you can obviously press the point with the committee members yourself, that would be appreciated.
Thank you for that. I think that particular agreement, if you want to call it that, was the only one that I can remember that arose from that discussion. We will cover this, I'm sure, at item 11, but my recollection of item 11 is that that is capable of some change, but I think those changes need to be agreed, I think, with the Chief Executive, if I've read the papers correctly. But I would hope that if anything emerges from those discussions that was worthy of including in the framework, then there would be a mechanism by which that would happen.
Yeah, okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Nigel. John, go ahead. Oh, sorry. Thank you.
Just for information, Matt did contact Councillor Holliday last week to start arrangements to have that meeting and have that discussion. So that is in process now.
Yep.
And the idea would be we would look at how we would report on contextual information that would be useful to the council. I would also like to add there is already quite a lot of that information on our website. if you need to see contextual information about health, education, any of those other things that affect the district. So that information is already there if you want to see it. The discussion is more about what comes to committees for review and then for action, as I see it, if that's okay.
Yeah, thank you, Alan. Absolutely, there's an awful lot of information, wealth of information there, and thank you for your work in supporting that. So I suppose the ball's in the court really of members of ONS. If you know, there's anything more we can do to assist, and please let us know. Okay. Item 8, purchase of further accommodation unit number 18, I believe, in Munsley. Indeed, go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. It's always a bitter-sweet thing to purchase another home for temporary accommodation, because I'm really glad that this is going to be made use of from a homeless household, and it's in a fantastic village and lots of amenities around it. In fact, an award-winning village. And that brings us up to 18, which means that 18 households do not have to be in bed and breakfast while we wait for a more permanent solution to their housing. It's, again, I really wish we didn't have to have temporary accommodation. I really wish that we could offer every single person a safe quality house, an affordable house to live in. But as we know from our housing crisis, that seems an impossible task at the moment without a lot more funding from central government. So I shall just move this to you and hope that you recommend this and approve it. Thank you.
Thank you, Wendy. Nikki, welcome. I don't know if there's anything you wanted to say further to that. Thank you. Okay, so certainly I would second, you know, that proposal. I think we have to. I think we've got about 50 households, have we, in temporary accommodation at the moment?
Thank you. We have 51 households in temporary accommodation at the moment. So if anybody is watching this and if they do have a property that they would like to rent, we have leasing and opportunities for landlords to come forward and help us, not only with temporary accommodation, but with permanent accommodation. Thank you.
So the numbers are truly stark, to be honest with you. So thank you for all yourself and officers are doing to tackle this huge issue. But I'm happy to second the recommendation. Was there anyone else that wanted to speak on the item? Okay, take that to the vote then. All those in favour, please. Thank you, that's unanimous. Item 9 is the budget monitoring report for the current financial year, period 6. Thank you, Nikki. And in place of Eric, Lucy is presenting this. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, members. The paper before you sets out the picture of where we are up until the end of September. But there is a note there to clarify where we expect to be at the end of the year. This is not a solitary position for this council. Councils across the country having to deal with increases to inflation and costs which were never envisaged when budgets were set in February. Our strong finances will enable us to deal with this year without cutting services to residents, which obviously makes us very different, unfortunately, to the county council, which are facing massive pressures. As we've said many times before, the current funding situation from the government is not supporting local governments, especially in maintaining services. And it's unfortunate that 12 months ago, the government position was to pass the buck onto local councils to get the taxpayer to fill any funding gaps. And unfortunately, looking forward, this doesn't seem to change much. This report, as I've said, is for 6 months to September, and finance officers have now got a better understanding of the impact of inflation, higher interest rates and salary awards that are likely to impact on the council finances. The reported overspend at the end of the year is just a forecast currently, and experience suggests that this may change. However, this administration is not complacent about the financial challenges we face, and it is for this reason that there will be regular updates to members on the measures being taken to mitigate and reduce the current deficit. We are, however, prepared to use the surplus of 616,000 from the previous financial year to help in this process, as this need was highlighted in a previous report. That's all I've got to say at the moment. If anybody has any questions, I will happily field them if I can, and if not, I'm sure Councillor Seward would provide written answers.
Thank you, Lucy. I think truly challenging, isn't it? The level of inflationary pressure that now exists. Comparing our previous monitoring reports, you can see a significant difference, of course, as a result of inflationary pressures. I mean, the caution that I'd make is that, you know, this takes us up to September, of course, but this is rampant pressure and it's continuing, sadly. So whilst we've been in a good position to manage the council's finances, the council's been in a good position with its finances for some period of time. This really does present a big problem, and moving forward, I suspect we will see more and more inflationary pressures in the months to come. So we've obviously, you know, got some challenge here to try and address some of that, but clearly there will be some impacts into the future. I've got an indication from Nigel. Was there anyone else that wanted to speak? Christopher, Nigel and Christopher, go ahead.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. It may be a little premature to be too concerned about that figure at the moment, but if it turns out that something close to that is the outturn figure at the end of the year, then that will be an unusual, I think, outcome in my recollection. And if that is the case, then I would certainly be looking for reasons as to why that has happened. Where are they one-off reasons, or are they an indication of a more challenging trend that this organisation will have to measure up to? So I merely raise it as I said, we're halfway, this is a halfway position through the year, and I don't think my memory will be that reliable with regard to the halfway positions on many past years, but it's the outcome, really, the outturn at the end of March that will really be relevant. And if we've got something like this sitting on our books, that will be a great concern. So I don't know whether anybody wants to explain or if there are any one-off reasons, or if we can give an assurance that this is not likely to be the result at the end of the year, then that would be most welcome. Thank you.
I mean, Nigel, we're clearly facing inflation of over 10%, and it's addressed within the item, the different areas where we're seeing the pressure in terms of staffing costs, fuel, energy, obviously we've got the leisure centres, but we've got our main building, but streetlights, public conveniences, all sorts of other assets. I think the risk is obviously moving forward that it increases, you know, the inflation strain increases moving forward, given some of the potential impacts. So I share some of your concerns, but I think the reasons why this is happening is quite clear. Lucy, and then Christopher.
Yeah, in February we couldn't have predicted this. In fact, none of us in the room and as members of the council could predict that this was coming. The difficulty that we've got is that the financial situation across the country is so volatile that there is no sense from one day to the other of what's happening next. The only thing that we can do as an authority is plead to government to take control of where we are and help steady our finances as a country going forward to bring some stability at a local level. This isn't just us as a council that are facing these cost increases. I had somebody stop me in the street the other day to ask why milk had gone up 40p. And to some people that's not a lot, but to other people that's crippling. So we as a complete nation are facing the same issue. So I would love to say that this is just a bump in the road, but in February we didn't see it. Nobody saw it. So I can't sit here now and say that in 6 months' time, this situation is going to be resolved or isn't going to be here. And that's the difficulty we face overall, I would say, as a council.
Yeah, thank you, Lucy. Christopher, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So my question sort of follows up to the point that Councillor Dixon's made, was if we go to page 25, if we look at where we were at the end of the last period, I think we were at the council was estimating an underspend of about 470k. We're now looking at an overspend of 900k, and the reasons for that are listed on page 25, which mainly are sort of four new entries in this. You've got employee inflation, energy costs, leisure contract, and Serco waste contract. How solid are those estimates? Because, for example, employee inflation I thought would be reasonably solid because we know what the pay round review is going to be. So are there any other, so get a view on actually how confirmed they are. Also, I mean, is there anything else that could be that may come in which has not been anticipated yet that could further increase those estimates?
Okay, thank you, Christopher. So I think, as far as I'm aware, we are trying to do something about the energy costs, but that's where we think we are in terms of a sort of ballpark figure. But you know, certainly it's been clear on everyone the level of inflation on energy costs. And that could obviously, you know, if there are any further increases, it could impact on several of those budgets. But that's where we are at the moment. We know where we are with our own employee inflation, but what we don't know is, potentially other pressures, for instance, within the Serco waste contract and others that could cause that to increase. So there are some unknowns, but I think, you know, it's a very good job been done here of estimating where we could be. But I think it's, you know, important that members receive a regular update of where we are on the measures being undertaken to reduce the current deficit as per the recommendation. So we've clearly got some way to go with this. We're on period 6, but obviously we need to keep abreast of the developments and keep you all informed.
Thank you, Chair. Can I just sort of slightly clarify something? We have a lot of various areas and departments and et cetera, and all of these are under pressure, under budget wise. Do we have a priority list? I mean, there are obviously items in here that we have to do. I mean, waste collection has to be done, has to take a priority. And then we would probably have a nice to have list. And you know what I'm going to say? I'm going to say things like the Chroma Pier and the reef, etc. They're nice to have, but how much of a priority can we afford to give them over the ones that are absolutely we have got to do?
I don't think we're necessarily in a position where we're forced to have that sort of conversation yet. I think other authorities certainly have been already. There have been authorities that have closed leisure centres because of the pressures that they are under. That is deeply regrettable, and you know, I sincerely hope we could avoid such a thing happening. In terms of things like the pier works, obviously, you know, it's the third phase of work. We know we've got to do it to maintain the structural integrity of the pier. Otherwise, I think, as we described during an earlier meeting, it would sort of be a big gap where the theatre currently is at the moment. But we've obviously been able to predict that for some time. Of course, it is subject to some inflationary pressure, contract that big. I think our leisure centres are very well used, as we've seen. You know, the footfall within the Reef has been tremendous, very well received. And it would be a great shame indeed to consider any sort of reduction in that offer. And I don't think we're quite at that stage, and hopefully we can avoid that. But in terms of a priority, obviously you might sort of prioritise certain operational services above some of those things. As we've already heard today, clearly there's an awful lot of pressure in housing. We know moving forwards, I think the council's got more work to do in terms of its people services, its focus on people, given the pressure on household budgets and the support we give to people. And you know, we obviously had a bit about that last week at the cost of living summit, but we also heard from some of the organisations that are at the sort of coalface of that already, how good some of the services that we're providing are, and we clearly wouldn't want to see those reduced at this time. So there are certain things you might want to say, well, they're particularly important, but I certainly wouldn't want to weigh up the value of the leisure centres versus those sort of services at this time, because we know, of course, how important leisure centres are to health, well-being, and many other things. I've got Lucy and then John, and then I'll come back to you, Nigel.
Yeah, I just wanted to reiterate, we're not looking at any service cuts for the coming year, at least currently. But is that what you were intimating? Are we looking at making any service cuts going forward? There isn't any plans to, but this is always something that we're going to be mindful of. Our staff are used to working in a way to get best value for money for residents. So they are consciously making decisions to get best value for council taxpayers. So if we are to look at anything going forward, it's not at the moment. We're not in a position where we're having to make drastic decisions at the moment, and we're very fortunate.
There are some efficiencies being made, particularly for a short-term period where we are considering, you know, whether we're filling vacancies as they arise, and that probably won't provide an awful lot savings now for the rest of the financial year. But you know, clearly there's a challenge there. If a vacancy does arise, do we need to fill it, or is there some other way we can do that work? But obviously mindful that we're all also very lean as an organisation, and pressure is building on staff every time we do that, and pressure is already at quite a significant level, I would say, in some of those services. John?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Morning, everybody. Yeah, whilst you know, I accept Councillor Rest's argument about, you know, where we may have to make tough decisions in the future. I'm pleased to hear that we're not facing that at the moment. But I'd like some assurance that also there's more to it than the numbers. We have to be a bit more holistic, where we could make a cut in some places would actually increase pressures elsewhere. So I'd just like some assurances that we will do that as a council as well, that we understand the knock-on effect of making that choice. Thank you.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right, John. In terms of, you know, the impact on quality of life, on business, on many other areas, if you start implementing any sort of service reduction, would be certainly counterproductive, maybe even economically damaging, but certainly damaging to some people's lives. So there's certainly an impact if you start reducing services. And as I said earlier on, I think, you know, we're already very lean, and we have to face the challenges that residents are facing now with cost of living. So I think there's work to be done there. Sorry, is it Nigel? Have I forgotten? Go ahead.
I just wanted to come back on my question, really, and that was to simply say that, of course, the macro, national and international situation is one that all councils have to operate in. This isn't peculiar to North Norfolk. But amongst district councils in particular, but when I say district councils, I think the field is very different for county councils, but for district councils, North Norfolk has been what I would describe as in a comfortable position in past years compared with many other district councils. And so if this situation, which is forecast, comes to be, that would be, I think, a matter of concern, because it would be out of the pattern that we have been used to seeing in past years. And I think that ought to prompt us to look more carefully at perhaps some factors that may be peculiar to North Norfolk rather than across the field, because, as I said, all councils are operating in that macro financial situation that we have at the moment.
Thank you, Nigel. I share your concerns. I wouldn't say we're comfortable, but I've said we've been capable, perhaps, of dealing with the pressures that all authorities face due to sound financial governance and careful management of that. I also think it's worth mentioning we've not got a lot of debt, which is something that does, contrast with other authorities. And you mentioned county councils, of course. We know the financial pressures they are under. Virginia, sorry.
I just wanted to say, yes, this council has had a reputation for sound finances, and the fact that we don't have debt means that we are sheltered from a growing cost. But what I really wanted to say was in response to what John mentioned earlier. Everybody will be aware that health has become more important for this council. We have a new structure throughout the county with the Integrated Care Partnership. And I would just like to say, in view of some things supporting others, our discretionary services are of enormous support to the health agenda for the county as a whole. I'm thinking of things like our public conveniences, which are discretionary service, leisure centres, discretionary service, our woodlands and beaches are discretionary services. So exactly, even if it were to come to pass that we were weighing one service against another, and there's no indication at the moment that we shall have to do that, we should not lose sight of the fact that because something is not mandated by central government, it is not of enormous benefit to our residents. Thank you.
Yes. Okay. All right. Was there any further points on this item? Okay. Well, thank you. Thank you for the work putting this together, and Lucy for presenting, and Jenny for help in the report as well. So a lot of staff. So it's obviously some challenging figures there, but we could expect that to a great extent given the inflationary pressures that are facing the country. In terms of the recommendations, I'm happy to propose that they are accepted, seconded by Lucy, and all those in favour, please. Unanimous. Again, thank you. Item 10 is the prudential indicators for 21-22. Lucy, are you presenting this again?
Yes, I don't actually have anything to add to this. This is a standard report to come to Cabinet.
Thank you. Were there any questions? Bit of a thriller, this one, isn't it? It doesn't tend to present a lot of questions. Okay. All right. I'm happy to propose the recommendations are accepted and seconded by Lucy. All of those in favour, please. Brilliant. Thank you. Item 11 is the performance management framework. And this has already been to open scrutiny, of course, where there was modest discussion. We've already had a bit of a chat about that earlier on in the agenda, and where further contextual information might come in. Of course, a lot of that is already available to members, so it's more just for them to describe what more detail they would like at the committee. I think Helen, thank you for the work you've done here. It's very good, very well presented, and hopefully it sets the course of direction very well for performance oversight and management. Are there any questions on the item? Christopher and then Nigel.
Just one question. If I go to page 66, you've got reporting framework and you've got red, amber, green status. I couldn't see anywhere in the report what the definition of red, amber and green would be. So I just wonder whether Helen could give us an update on that, please.
That can
Yeah,
easily
page
be added.
73, sorry.
Oh, sorry.
No, sorry.
Sorry, I was just about to say that it's on page 73.
Oh, is it? Okay, thank you. Helen, I don't know if there's anything you wanted to say further to that. Yeah. Thank you. Okay. Nigel, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. On page 69, just for clarification, the second box from the bottom refers to the Development Management Committee. Is this the same as the Development Control Committee, or as it's now called Development Control, or is this a separate?
No, that's the same one. That's presumably an error of mine if it's not called that anymore. It's definitely the whatever planning development committee is called. I'll put the correct title in.
It's just
Used to be called in plain language the Planning Committee, and then it evolved into other terminology. So just so long as we're consistent, and I wasn't aware of a management committee, so I thank you for that.
I think there was, I agree with Councillor Dixon. It used to be called the Planning Committee. Then it was, I think, Planning Committee East and West, and then Development Committee. I think there then became Development Control, and I think there's a concern about control in that it isn't about control, it is about management, because this planning involves positive planning as well as respect for sort of conservation areas and listed buildings. So there is an element of control, but I think there was a move towards development management, but we need to ensure that the terminology is consistent throughout. So we'll do that.
Okay, brilliant. Thank you. I've got a few indications for Angie first, then Andrew, Christopher.
I've been here virtually since God was a boy, so I remember all of them. If you look in the council handbook on the website, it is definitely the Development Committee.
Yeah.
It was Development Control, and we decided that was a bit harsh a long time ago, so we just dropped the control bit.
Okay, thank you, Angie.
Yeah, just to help out here a little bit. Development management is a section in the planning department that deals with household applications. We've also got the major developments team that deal with larger applications. So I think management has probably crept in because it's used in that context. So if management's removed and it's just annotated as development committee, that would be accurate, but that might explain how the error has occurred.
Sure, fair enough. Okay. All right. Oh, bit of a history lesson there on the development committee. So thank you all. Christopher, go ahead.
Thank you. Go to page 75. We've got the key measures down. You've got climate, coast, and the environment. If you look at the key performance measures, there's nothing in the coast. Is there any reason for that?
75. Yeah.
Well, there isn't much that we can measure in terms of the coast that is of a strategic nature. So we are the Coast Protection and Management Authority. We have responsibility for coast defences for 26 miles of our 45-mile coastline from Kellinghard in the west through to Cart Gap in the east. Much of our responsibility in terms of capital works would be funded through grant in aid from the Environment Agency and DEFRA. This authority has historically had a small revenue to capital works in terms of repair and maintenance of some of those assets, in terms of public safety, and particularly marking with groin ends and that sort of thing, to ensure that those assets remain safe in terms of public access. But in terms of any key performance indicators that were meaningful or comparable with other authorities. I think there aren't any national indicators that you would benchmark in that sense. We've obviously been successful in being awarded money through the Coastal Transition Accelerator Programme, and a series of framework and performance measures will be developed in respect of that programme. And Rob Goodleaf has recently submitted a proposal to the Environment Agency in respect of the strategic direction for that programme over the next 4.5 years. But I don't think there are any headline indicators that would be measurable in terms of the overall key performance indicator framework.
Okay, Angie, go ahead.
I wish we could measure which bits of our cliff are going to fall down next. If we could, it would make our life an awful lot easier. But unfortunately, we are very much dependent on the Almighty. So thank you, Steve, for pointing that out, but it is virtually impossible. But I can assure you that once we work up CTAP, and also we are awarding the contract for Cromer Munsey scheme, there will definitely be indicators within that. And we have a very, very rigorous team of monitoring our scheme, if you like. We always, fingers crossed, we don't go wrong this time. I might talk it up, but we always deliver on time and within budget.
Thank you, Angie. Okay, so if we're happy to accept the recommendations, which is that we approve the performance management framework, delegate authority to the chief executive to approve any amendments to the framework prior to the full review in 4 years' time. And obviously we just had the minor point, didn't we, about the description of the development committee. But I'm happy to propose that that is accepted, seconded by Lucy. All of those in favour, that's unanimous. Thank you. Item 12, North Norfolk Corporate Plan review of delivery February 2020 to October 22, and agreement of priority objectives for the remaining period of the council to May 23. So thank you for the work that's been done by Steve Blatch and others to produce this report. Obviously, we've had a significant amount of additional pressure during the life of this council with COVID particularly, and the significant change in strategic operational direction that necessitated, but of course it was the right thing to do, and residents and businesses were in need of assistance, and the council stepped up and delivered very well, and that was recognised. Despite that, I think the council has managed to deliver so much of what it set out to achieve. So I think that's really commendable, and thank you again to all the officers of this council for their work in getting us there. Really, because tremendous given some fairly overwhelming circumstances, to be honest with you. So we're very pleased with what's been done, and we wanted to reiterate that. But obviously there's been some decisions made here in terms of what we do prioritize and what we don't over the remaining period of time, and I think we've had a good discussion about that, which has led to the production of this paper, and I think there's some good and exciting things that will be delivered by May. Of course, some significant challenges, as we know, around housing, around the pressure people face with energy bills, that will likely go beyond that period of time into the next council. Of course they will. So I don't think I've got anything further to say, so happy to open it up to questions, and Nigel, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yes, I have some. So I have a substantive query really around business growth, and one or two other points for clarification. At page 86 and paragraph 3.3, the first item there is to publish a new economic growth strategy for the district. The obvious statement that I might make is that shouldn't that have been done long ago? And I think there is a very strong argument for that, and I'm sure you would probably come back with a similar response as to the reasons as to why that isn't the case. But the real reason why I raise this is actually not to do with economic or business growth per se. It is to do with the local plan. And I'm aware that we are at the closing stage of the draft local plan, and we intend to submit that for examination early in the new year. What troubles me, I suppose, really, is that I'm struggling to understand how you can have a new local plan which doesn't include a current strategy for economic growth, because that has to be a key strand of the local plan. And I have over many years been banging on about economic development and infrastructure sitting full square alongside residential development. So when I come to look at the more detailed plan on page 94, which deals with this, I have to say I am concerned because I'm not convinced that we have sufficient suitable locations for economic growth, or the use of mixed sites allocations in the draft plan, or that we've thought through the infrastructure that would go alongside that. And that really does concern me, because we have got ground to make up in terms of business and economic growth. And I don't see how you can do that on the back of a strategy that is some years old, and you've got a plan that's looking forward, a local plan that's looking forward 15 years. And that strategy should be one of the key planks of that local plan, in exactly the same way as our housing strategy is a key plank to that. So it does worry me that we have reached this advanced stage of the local plan, and yet we don't have a current and a future looking, forward looking economic development strategy.
Okay, thank you. Well, I think, just picking up one thing you said about ground to make up, I would agree with that. We do. But clearly, the challenge was that during COVID, we had to respond to the then present needs of businesses and keeping businesses going. And that was recognised. In fact, it was award winning. But of course, it has impacted on our ability to deliver that strategic goal, which certainly we value. And certainly, I've lost sight of that, and it will be delivered. But it's clearly faced a great deal of sort of time pressure, essentially, as a result of things that were out of our control. The local plan itself, of course, has had a further upset as a result of nutrient neutrality, which I'd largely put down to government incompetence, to be honest with you. It shouldn't have happened in the way that it has, whilst we recognise that nutrient pollution in our rivers needs to be tackled. It shouldn't have happened at the expense of delivering any houses. So I think there are various demonstrable sort of factors that are out of our control, but all through this council, we've demonstrated that as a council that we will continue to try and achieve those, and we've really realistically had to drop very little. Obviously, you can see some timescales there in terms of the economic strategy, and my anticipation is that will happen within those new forecast timescales. So await December, and hopefully we will have something to consider as cabinet members, and something obviously for you to consider at a later date.
if I might just come back, I mean, I don't dispute the situation with regard to COVID and the impact, but of course, the local plan has been similarly affected as well, not just by COVID, but also by nutrient neutrality. And so I think it's understood that things have kind of moved to the right. What I'm really saying is that the two have got out of phase here. The economic strategy should have been there to inform the local plan in respect to what the future needs for growth of the economy and commensurate infrastructure implications as well. And I'm struggling to understand how a strategy that will be approved hopefully in December, or at least be in perhaps a finalized form in December, how that's going to be able to inform the local plan when the local plan is pretty much, you know, the ink isn't dry, so to speak, but it's drying, and there won't be, as I can see, much opportunity for that new strategy to influence the local plan in the new year. That's the challenge.
Okay, thank you, Nigel. Got an indication from John?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I won't want to take anything from Councillor Brown, who sits on the Plan Policy Built Heritage. I largely agree that these things should be joined up. Part of the issue, I think, historically, is we've had our old plan, and the things that have needed delivering that by other organisations have not necessarily been delivered. We produce a plan, and others should look at that plan and be delivering in terms of infrastructure, power delivery, water. You know, so that we don't have the issues with nutrient neutrality. So water's being treated. The water authorities should be doing it. So I agree that we should have better connectivity of one following from the other. The strategies, the housing strategy is based on our lists and growths, expected population growth, whereas the plan is largely based on what the government requires us to build as new houses, and therefore we have to look for site allocations. And similarly, I believe with the industrial shared use type areas, they are governed by other things. It would be nice, I absolutely agree. And I would like to think as we bring this strategy forward, we do what we can to integrate that. But I think it's, whilst we as a council must do what we can to bring that integration, as I say, I largely agree that it should be together. I think the mechanisms that are external to us may affect how we can do that as well. But I think so I must come to a question is, do we have an assurance that we are going to try and integrate that as best we can before the plan goes off? So thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, John. I'll bring Andrew in and then come to Virginia.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Well, as Councillor Dixon well knows, because he is a member of the Planning Policy and Built Heritage Working Party, we do have measures in the local plan that deal with the allocation of economically productive land. However, there are constraints on local plan making. It's historical that this the system that we operate nationally and government guidance doesn't do as much as it could do to support the integration of planning policy with economic development. I mean, we've heard recently that the latest fad of government is to promote brownfield development as opposed to development on greenfield or greenbelt land. We have very little of that in our district, as most rural districts have very little brownfield land, and therefore, you know, one wonders what sort of benefit we have from brownfield land. It's going to be quite limited. We don't operate a system similar to what they have in the United States, where there is very much more integration. We've seen this, the problem that we have in the context of providing development for healthcare. We can make land available, but that doesn't guarantee that it will be used to develop our economy. and provide, healthcare provision in our district. We will have an opportunity before the local plan comes to Cabinet, probably on the 6th of February, in two meetings, not the meeting next Monday, but in the meetings in December and January, to do a wash up on the local plan. There will be an opportunity. The public have been consulted previously several times about what they would like to see. I am happy at the moment that our plan is compliant in terms of its soundness and its legal requirements, which are vitally important to the advancement and development of our local plan. And I think that's probably all I can say at this particular stage. It would be nice to marry up economic policy with the local plan, but the demands upon us as an authority to provide allocated sites and to protect from development being in the wrong place is such that we need to get the local plan in place as early as we possibly can and to the inspector for approval next year, regardless of whether the challenges nationally to our economy have held back our ability to develop an economic growth strategy in the district.
Yeah, thank you, Andrew. I think that's that item a concern for the time being, but clearly it will be something we observe and discuss further with the economic strategy. I've got one more indication, Virginia, if you still wish to speak.
Yes, I don't have a huge amount to add. I just wanted to say that, like Angie, I've been around a long time and I've actually had the privilege of going through the process of the local plan twice. And
Bless you.
it's always struck me as quite an impressive and democratic process. I think it's something this council has done well. But I just wanted to say there may not be an economic strategy on the table right now, but that isn't in any way to assume that the local plan isn't founded in economic research. I mean, at every stage, research is done, papers are produced. That is the way it works. So it would be wrong for anyone watching to assume that this means it's uninformed by economics. That's all I wanted to say. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, well, clearly looking forward, there's some significant pressures around cost of living crisis that we'll be looking at. We know about the problems with housing. We've already mentioned it several times during the meeting, but there is some good opportunities that we hope to realise within the next few months. Obviously, we've got the work starting in Stalham early on in the new year, which I hope will be informative for the council. Some good work has started on the youth council, of course, and the inaugural meeting of the youth council was held very successfully. Thank you again to Emma for that. And many other good things, just picking out the play strategy, for instance. I know it's quite a difficulty to see how where that will go at the moment, but some good things as well for the district, as well as the challenges that we hope to face successfully. I'm happy to propose that we accept the recommend. Sorry, Nigel, I'll come to you before I do that. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I did say I had another point to add to my more substantial point. I think you might have touched on it, but the third point down on para 3.3 of page 86 refers to the High Street Task Force undertaking community engagement work in Stalham in Q1 of 23. Are you able to describe what that's going to be? What's that going to look like?
So we obviously were able to essentially bid for this. Is that the right thing to say? We managed to secure the support and successfully. So Stalham seemed like the obvious choice for us, obviously discussions with yourself, with other Stalham members, Richard, and I'm not entirely sure, what the process will entail. It's something, I'm looking at soon, but clearly we aspire to do some more work in Stalham, and, we want to contribute towards the vitality of the town and ensure that its local economy is secure and developing in the future. So obviously, we've had a discussion in Stalham ourselves about the sort of things that you as local members would like to see. And I think there's a need to have that conversation with the community, with businesses. And I think this is maybe one part of that work looking forward that we need to do there in the towns. I don't know, Steve, you wanted to come in, you the microphone and I interrupted, thanks.
So the High Street Task Force is a sort of government sponsored organisation. They have worked with a number of authorities in terms of the future High Street funds and town deal proposals. And then in March of this year, they identified a longer list of authorities with whom they would seek to work over the next 24 months. And North Norfolk was in the second tranche of that. For delivery from Q1 in 2023, we were asked to nominate or propose a town or location where such a conversation or intervention would be valued and supported. And on the basis of the conversations which were ongoing in Stalham at that time, we proposed Stalham, and that location's been accepted. In drafting this report, we have sought an update from the High Street Fund around when they will look to deliver and engage with local partners, but we haven't had a response as yet.
Okay, slightly more concerning, but obviously appreciate our intent. Nigel, go ahead.
Yes, thank you for that. That's news, good news, and I may have missed it, but I hadn't seen anything anywhere which indicated that such an initiative was likely to emerge. So is this the first time that this is kind of surfaced, or has it been evident in other places?
We did mention it in conversation with yourself in passing, Nigel, that it was something that we were looking to progress. It was a sort of obvious, choice, obviously, given the conversations we were having. I think, we'd like to do a project in Stalham. Obviously, we spoke mostly about highways and utilities concerns, which whilst aren't an issue for this council per se, I think there's more work for us to do there as an authority. So, yeah, this has been on the cards for some time, as it were, but obviously we'll gain the profile that it deserves in the new year.
Yes, I mean, we have lots of passing conversations, but lots of those passing conversations simply travel onwards, and they don't come to pass, so to speak. But clearly, this one, it sounds as though it will, and I just think that something like this needs to be shared in the public domain in a way that will help perhaps Stalham to prepare for that, and sometimes it's about motivating and trying to raise ambitions, and so something positive of this nature, if it's shared with the town at its earliest point, can start to garner enthusiasm, and that's what's, I think, needed. So the sooner we can do that, the better it will be.
Yeah, absolutely. So the town council and local members, district members are certainly aware. But we will certainly keep you appraised of what happens there, Nigel. Thank you. Okay, was there any further indications? Virginia, go ahead.
We're asked to comment here. Cabinet asked to review and comment on the progress made against the original unrevised plan. I'd just like to say it's never been my impression that North Norfolk District Council is overstaffed. And yet, in the last few years, we've seen staff turn around delivering food parcels, delivering millions and millions of pounds worth of grants for which they've received awards. And then turning around to find homes for Ukraine, for people from Ukraine, to inspect those homes, to have a forum here so that people could come along on Tuesday and Thursday afternoons originally. And we've supported that with a new officer. I'd just like to say, I think that delivering all of this in connection with all of that, I think we owe gratitude to a lot of people. So thank you. Thank you to our staff.
Yeah. Standing flexibility that I think the staff have shown has manifested itself such a strength really for the authority. So yeah, we're immensely grateful for all that's been achieved and all that, you know, perhaps we didn't expect we'd have to do that has that's been faced, and I think recognised that they did such a good job during those very difficult times. Okay, so happy to propose the recommendations are accepted, seconded by Wendy. All those in favour? It's unanimous, thank you. Sorry, just flicking back to the start of my agenda. Go ahead.
Could I please ask you just to indulge and go back to item number 6 as members' questions? I'm afraid I was slightly distracted by some personal issues, but I do have it, if you would allow that.
Yeah, I would allow that.
Thank you very much. It relates back to something you said about the cost of living the debate that was had here. I'm not sure if you're aware, there was a lot of confusion for members to log into that.
Okay.
It was actually advertised as Teams. When we tried to get into Teams, you couldn't get in. It was then apparently changed to Zoom, but we weren't aware of this.
Okay.
Also, I wasn't aware that there was an audience within the chamber. Now, I can fully understand that you may not want 40 members to have turned up, but I'm not sure how many member representation there was actually in the chamber when that conference was going on. So it's a little bit disappointing because I thought the subject was absolutely very important, and it is something that I'm constantly getting emails from my constituents. So I'd just like to register the fact that we don't normally ever have a problem, but I don't know what happened. I was informed that other emails were sent changing the venue. I have no registration. I know Councillor Cushing had the same, and I had 1 or 2 others as well, but I just thought it was important to register that fact that it was a little bit disappointing. I'm sure we can find it and it was recorded, but it isn't quite the same as being there and asking the questions at the time.
Yeah, okay. Well, I'm sorry to hear that. That's regrettable. Obviously, you know, we're very pleased with the event, despite those technical hitches, I think, which I wasn't aware of myself. Yeah, we had a very good turnout here. Yeah, of course, we couldn't have had, you know, a substantial turnout of members. It would have overfilled the room, but we had here many local organisations, both more well-known, such as the Food Bank, but of course some of the town and parish councils who were also responding to this crisis. I've seen hand, it was a thoroughly good event, very informative, and I think a lot of you know, effort has gone into to ensuring that event took place in a short space of time. So, you know, very appreciate the efforts of staff who've done that really. But clearly, you know, there's learning points for us now, and it's hard to, I think, plan the response to the cost of living crisis at this stage. You know, different issues will manifest, and we'll have to adapt as necessary. But we've certainly got some things we need to take away and plan for. So I think you'll have the opportunity, obviously, to engage with this topic quite a lot, John, and you know, happy to obviously have a discussion offline. But you know, please do stay in touch with all the staff that are who are responding to this variously in different ways. Of course, I'm sure you are, for the benefit of your local members, but there'll be some strategic thinking, I think, for us to do as an authority moving forward. Virginia, go ahead.
Wendy and I did request a recording, but it's my understanding that none was made for various reasons.
Yeah, that we wanted the discussion to be, I suppose, would the word be candid? I don't know, fairly open to describing things that perhaps we wouldn't necessarily want distributed that widely. I think we wanted people to speak comfortably. Is that the correct thing to say, Lucy? There's not a recording as far as I know, no.
Yes.
Sure. Okay, well, obviously, I think members were invited, but it was.
I don't know, councillor West, I'll need to check. My understanding was there was only 4 members of cabinet physically present in the chamber, but a number of members did dial in, and indeed a couple asked questions online, and the corporate PA team that facilitated that did read those questions and ensure that they were directed to some of the speakers that delivered presentations, but I wasn't aware there wasn't a formal recording. I will need to establish that.
There certainly wasn't one we could share. I don't know if there has been a recording made, but we'll have that discussion. Okay. Well, thank you anyway for the intervention, John. Were there any other indications? Sorry. No. Okay. So we've no reason to exclude. Well, we have no members of the public or press to exclude anyway, and no reason to do so. No private business. So thank you for your time this morning.